Welcome to the show, All Things Writing. I am your host, Brian the Writer. Let me take you on a journey through my writing life and introduce you to some of the amazing talent that exists in the writing world. Whether you are looking for a little advice or just to catch an interesting interview, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. All Things Writing starts now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to All Things Writing. I'm your host, Brian the Writer. We have not done an actual, interview with an author in quite a while, and I figured that was an oversight on my part, so we're going to rectify that. We're rectifying that right now, as a matter of fact. So, who would I roll out to make this kind of an awesome thing, right? What author would I get? Now, you might not have heard of the name. He's a fellow horror writer, fellow denizen of the dark, a fellow spooky brethren. He's a guy that I've known for a little while now. He's a fellow HWA Virginia chapter member, Horror Writers Association Virginia chapter member. And I'm so glad we could make this work. So let's see. Let me tell you a little bit about this guy. I'm stealing this off of his website. A lot of novels, including Black, the Labo Coven, Dark Shadows, Dream of the Dark. That was written with Elizabeth Massey, by the way. Blue Devil Island, The House at Blacktooth Pond, which is pretty cool. He's also written well over 200 short stories as well to sort of populate that industry. He was a fellow published writer with me in the Dark Horners anthology. Let me just look real quick, because that's the thing that I find amazing. This was the Dark Horners book, and honestly, it's a great piece of work. Oh, I need my glasses because I'm old. Hold on one second. Let's see, Mr. Mark Rainey, where are you? He was. So I thought he was. Yes, there he is. He wrote the book, or wrote the short story Doom at Dragon's Roost. If you do not have a copy of Dark Corners, The Old Dominion, please go out and get yourself a copy of this book. You may find some at horror conventions or book things. They're still floating around out there. I've thought of actually picking up some myself just so I can have it on hand. But anyway, so with that, without further ado, I want to, take this opportunity to say and invite, in no uncertain terms, a guy who's, I'm not fit to hold his bloody sword. I don't know, bloody sword, bloody hammer, bloody, I don't know, what do we use for horror? Anyway, I'm not really fit to do that. He's way more accomplished than I am, which is great, because you should always get people on the show, my personal philosophy, that are cooler than I am, and Mark is indeed way cooler. Welcome to the show, Mr. Mark Rainey. Mark, welcome.
Hey, Brian, thanks for having me on. And I'm sure it'll be a good time.
It's my absolute honor to have you on. I often say that the thing that you should do whenever you do a recording like this is, or go to a meeting or anything else, make sure you are the dumbest person in the room. And I am the dumbest person in the room. I'm in the presence of greatness. So the fact that I can entice you on to my tiny little program is always much appreciated.
Well, I'll be sending you an invoice, of course.
That's good. I will have my financial advisor pay that, and she has 4 legs and she barks at cars. So good luck with that. Good luck with that. So Mark, I was talking a little bit earlier in the intro about the world of horror in general. And you've been at it way longer than I am. How long have you been actually writing?
Somewhere in the vicinity of 40 years. What year is this? 2025. So I actually wrote my first story that was intended for publication, I believe it was, in 1985. As far as like a horror short story, I had done a Godzilla versus the Thing film book for a magazine called The Monster Times back in 1974. It was a tabloid style publication, a big newspaper devoted to horror movies, monster movies. And a friend of mine that I was a pen pal with had done a film book on Destroy All Monsters, which was one of my favorite Godzilla films. And so I asked him about how'd you do that? And he says, well, I wrote the Monster Times and asked them if they wanted a film book for the movie. And they said yes. So I wrote the Monster Times and asked them if they wanted a film book for Godzilla versus the Thing. And they said yes. So I wrote it and I sent it to them and got paid $35, I believe, which back then, for a ninth grader, that was big money. That could safely be said to be my first published work, although it wasn't really an original property.
So I'm an observant kind of guy. I made my career out of a pretty good life out of watching what's going on around me. And I have to say, unless I miss my guess, you're a big monster buff.
I am. I'm still, a big old Godzilla fan. The old original, the original Godzilla from 1954, the Japanese version, is probably my all-time favorite film. And of course, I grew up on the American version of it, starring Raymond Burr, and I still like that one. But there is scarcely a Godzilla movie that, whether it be silly or straight or what have you, I loved a lot of them. And, so many other monster movies and such from the 50s and 60s I grew up on. I still love watching those things, like the Giant Behemoth and the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Anything that's got some kind of dinosaur creature, Gorgo, all that stuff. Those are real favorites still.
So, and just as an interesting aside for any viewer out there, there's a really good YouTube. It's from a news organization. It's a recording of the interview with the guy who played the original Godzilla, and he played it over many, many, many years.
Hiro Nakajima.
Yeah, he talks about how it was one of the greatest honors of his life to play that character, and it if you don't cry a little bit, you will towards the end, because the guy's passion is just, it's gripping.
Yeah, he died just a few years ago, and he attended a number of the, at least I think it was several of what they call G-Fest that they have in Chicago, where they have guests from the Toho series and stuff like that. And I've been to quite a few, but I missed the one where Nakajima showed up. Yeah. I did get to meet some of the other folks from the Godzilla films and all.
So so I always consider sort of monsters as like the big Godzilla kaiju, the Titans sort of monsters is kind of one part of the horror writing world, because it's not all about monsters all the time, or maybe it's better to say it's monsters in a different framework.
Right.
What is your favorite? What is it that compels you to write in that genre? What is it that you look for in a good, solid story?
Well, as far as what compels me, I've said this so many times. I was the world's most terrified kid, I suspect. I live in the house right now where I grew up, and there's woods all around the house. And back in the days when I was, like 3 and 4 years old, I'd hear whippoorwills out in the woods. And those were the days, I'd be watching The Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and stuff with my dad. And when I heard those whippoorwills, they were kind of eerie sounding, and they were loud. And you couldn't convince me that those were little birds. Those were the monsters from the Outer Limits. And so I would be scared out of my wits. And I watched a lot of monster movies and horror movies in my early days. And so at school, we'd have like show and tell. And so I'd go to school for show and tell, and I would tell stories about the scary things that happened to me. And I might have embellished those a little bit. So what I discovered, there was a little thrill out of being scared. And the one thing I liked better than being scared was scaring other people. And so that, I suspect, was the genesis of my storytelling affinity. And of course, even back then, I was a voracious reader too. I read a lot of kids' books, of course. My favorite thing at school, in like third grade and such, once I had some kind of grasp of reading, was they'd have those, I guess it was Scholastic. They had the book order days, and you could order books. And that was one of the most exciting days ever, is when those book shipments came in. And I would get things like, there was a series of like spooky books. I can't even remember specifically what they were, but I knew I liked those. And in the library, they'd have stuff like Alfred Hitchcock's Monster Museum, which I loved that one. In fact, I found a copy of that on eBay a few years ago at a mint condition at a really good price. So I got a nice copy up on my shelf. And where things really led me into the writing field, though, was when I was in college. I was big into art. I mean, I got a Bachelor of Fine Art degree, and I did a lot of illustrative work, and I like to sort of tell stories to go along with whatever monstrous illustrations I was doing. But a friend of mine gave me a big stack of like the old Ballantine editions of H.P. Lovecraft stories. And of course, I had heard of Lovecraft, and I think by then I'd seen like the old 1970 Dunwich horror. But at that time, I was 21. I lived in a house with 5 other people out in the sticks outside of Athens, Georgia. And I started reading those Lovecraft stories one night. And it was a rare occasion for me to have that house to myself. So it was dark. It was quiet. And I was reading for the first time since I had heard those whippoorwills when I was a kid. I was pretty nervous that night. That really provided a real spark for that kind of cosmic horror that I've enjoyed writing ever since.
You mentioned Lovecraft and being out in the woods in Georgia, and the first thing I thought of, and I forget the exact story, but because I can never remember the titles of stories. I can remember the feel of the story, but never the titles. And a guy and his assistant are going through the forest deep into this. They're finding like a group of people that had been previously undiscovered. And I forget what horrible thing happens to them, but that's the imagery that it conjures up like right away. Lovecraft had that. If you can't remember the words, you remember the feel.
Yeah, of course. There was a chapter or section of the Call of Cthulhu where it had an inspector going deep out into the swamps and encountering a cult where they're dancing around the fire.
That might be what I'm thinking of, actually. That might be what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I remember that very feeling when I read that for the first time. Again, I was like 21 years old, and it was this atmosphere of dread that just captivated me. And that was so true of not just Lovecraft stories, but a lot of the associated writers who wrote in that subgenre, the weird fiction, the cosmic horror type.
Yeah. I was sitting here wondering to myself, and I'll pose the question to you, why do we like to scare people? Because I do too.
Yeah. Well, personally, as a reader, I think it's been said many times. You can get that sort of endorphin rush. You can get an adrenaline thrill of having a safe encounter with something scary. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sort of the flip side of the same coin, writing it or conveying it. I get a nice little buzz off of coming up with scary ideas, scary creatures, stories, people. And so conveying that to someone else, hopefully readers who will enjoy it and, not throw rocks at me and stuff, that is just entirely satisfying.
Yeah. I always like to say there's a certain amount of satisfaction when somebody comes up to me and says, I didn't sleep last night because of your book. Okay.
Yes.
Well, number one, why were you reading it just before you went to bed? That's a terrible idea. But number two, thank you.
Yeah. Well, one thing I will say is that books, as a kid and even as a younger adult, it was possible for books to scare me. Mm-hmm. Or I'm not sure that's the right word, to unsettle me.
Yeah.
And it has to be one hell of a book nowadays to even unsettle me. I think once you've been in it for a long time and developing scary material it's a whole set of creative nerves. For example, I've had a couple of doozies of nightmares I would say in the last decade or so. And there have been a couple of times that I've come awake and really unsettled, unnerved, but immediately the creative nerves come in. It's like, how can I use this? It becomes analytical rather than emotional.
Yeah.
And so the unsettled feeling is it's almost a thing of the past. So when I write, I try to call on my memories of being afraid or being undisturbed, and to effectively convey that in my work.
Yeah, the last nightmare I had, I woke up and immediately ran downstairs and wrote it down because I'm like, I cannot let this go. This is too good just to let this disappear into the ether. So how many, I was kind of reading through your About Me stuff on your website, and it got me to wondering, I know you've written over 200 plus short stories. How many novels have you written?
I believe it's an even dozen if you count the 5 Ameriscares books in Elizabeth Massey's Ameriscares series for young readers. So they're short. I mean, they're shorter novels. They in the adult scale, they would probably qualify more as novellas. I think they run somewhere between 45 and 60,000 words long.
Okay.
But the rest are all, they're for older people, old like you and me. Yeah. Well, me anyway.
Yeah. Well, me too. But it happens.
Yeah.
What's your? Is there a work that you've done over the years that you single into as being like one of your favorites? I know it's hard. It's like picking a child. It's like when people come up to you and say, "What's your favorite book?" I don't know.
Yeah. You mean of the ones I've written?
Yes.
I would say 2 of them. My latest, the one that came out in February, The House at Blacktooth Pond. And the other would be Blue Devil Island, which I believe came out first in 2007, maybe. It's hard to remember back that far sometimes. It was maybe my 4th or 5th book, and it was the culmination of many years of research and immersing myself in the world of World War II aviation. And this was a passion for me, apart from monsters and such. I've always loved World War II history, particularly the aerial war arenas. And while I would say equally passionate about both the Pacific and European theaters, there was something about the Pacific Air Wars that has always fascinated me. And so in Blue Devil Island, I combined my love of the monstrous with World War II history, the flying part. And I probably spent 3 years mostly researching, writing
Sure.
a bit at a time, but I I busted ass to make that as true history as was possible. I found so many like combat reports from the day and just all kinds of details.
Mm-hmm.
And the CEO of the company I worked for at the time, his dad was a World War II vet who flew Hellcats in the Pacific.
Oh, wow.
And so my CEO bought a copy of the book to send to his father. And one day I was sitting in the office and my phone rang, and it was my CEO's dad. And he was just excited as hell about this book. And he said, I almost couldn't believe you weren't there. And he did say, there are a few little details here and there that might have been a little sketchy, but he said, overall, I managed to capture something that was very rare for someone who was not there. And I considered that probably the best compliment I've ever had. In fact, there was nobody else in my office at the time, so I started running around,
Yeah.
I was all excited.
So let me your latest novel. Where did the idea for that come from?
Well, back in 2022 or 3, I had written a ghost story for an anthology edited by S.T. Joshi and Catherine Karasman. And it was called Shunned Houses, and they were supposed to be haunted house stories. Mm-hmm. And as a little background for that, when I was in my early 30s, and my brother and I would often get in his truck with his dog and just go out and about in the countryside around here and find old deserted dark roads and just hidden places where we could take his dog out for a walk. And we were out, somewhere out in the county, which, and this is a rural area.
Sure.
So it was late in the afternoon or early evening, and it was getting dark. And as we were walking down this path, I noticed all this foliage and creepers and all this stuff, but it had curiously regular angles. Mm-hmm. And I realized that was the roof of an old structure that was completely overgrown. And so I've always loved finding old stuff like that. So at that time, we just gave it a cursory look over and decided, okay, we're coming back here.
Yeah.
And so we went back. I don't think it was the next day, but it wasn't long after. And we went in the daytime and went inside the place, and it was just this old, crumbling structure that probably went, God knows how far it went back, but it had been deserted for a very long time. And we found in the little living room a stack of mail that thick, much of it unopened. A lot of it was opened, and it was mostly bills and past due notices. Sure. Obviously, the family that lived there was not doing that well. But it was almost as if they had just packed up and left, because there was so much original stuff in the house. I mean, it was in miserable condition. But I remember that the mail, the latest thing we found was like 20 years old. So we were just fascinated with this place. So my brother told some friends of his about it. And one of his friends there was getting married. So they decided to have the guy's bachelor party out at the old house late one night. So I went out there with them. And as you can imagine, we might have been inebriated on certain substances and fluids.
You're kidding.
No. So with no flashlights, no nothing, we decided to go in that house. So we all shuffled into the pitch dark house without a single light except cigarette lighters. I did remember there were some holes in the floor, and I had sort of an idea where they were. So we tried to avoid those, and there was a staircase that went to an upstairs floor. I don't believe, unless I went up those stairs when I was pretty tore up. I don't think I did. I don't remember, but I think my brother did later on. So all of this came into play for that haunted house story, which was called The House at Blacktooth Pond, and the Blacktooth Pond part of it came from a pond out in the woods behind the high school when I was in school. And I found it by way of going out there with my biology class in 10th grade to do water quality experiments. I was like, my God, there's this pond back here in the middle of the woods, and it's got all these broken tree trunks out, down at one end. And it was early morning, and there was a mist rolling across the pond, and I found it rather creepy. Yeah. So in the story and in the novel, I combine those two settings, the house and the pond. And so once I had written the story and it was published in Shunned Houses, the whole scenario of that thing kept haunting me. It was a standalone story, but I thought there are so many avenues that the story opened up in my imagination. So I finally started jotting down some notes, and I said, yes, I have enough to turn this thing into a novel. And so that is what happened. So last year I spent, I'm guessing I did it in 6 months, 6 to 7 months I spent writing it. And so it came out in February, and shortly thereafter it got a starred review in Publishers Weekly. So again, I was
congratulations
here at
thank
exciting. You, but I got the email early in the morning. I hadn't even gotten dressed yet, so I'm running around in the house, in my drawers going, starred review. But I think I call that my other favorite novel simply because it has so many personal connections to me.
Yeah. I think that is true of us as writers. You even just the description of the story made me dredge up memories. There was a pond behind our house, or not behind our house. It was actually behind the school, tucked back. It was called, oddly enough, literally, this was the name, Hidden Pond. I found it by accident one day, rolling around, strolling out there with my buddy, and I said, "We got to be the only people out here." And we turned the corner, and there were two dudes standing there fishing about our same age. I'm like, "You're kidding me?" And they said, "No, there's actually fish in here." I'm like, "It's insane." So when you're developing characters for that novel, I guess it flows logically that you're picking up people from your past. I can imagine some people from from that bachelor party probably formed part of it.
In the story, it is almost an exact, just translation of those events and dialogue to the best of my memory. In the novel, that it didn't quite happen as it did in the story. But yeah, there are a lot of very personal connections and influences. A lot of the characters are amalgamations of people that I have known or at least had experiences with, or that I've observed. Of course, the main characters have far more depth and resonance from true experiences and acquaintances. Some of the secondary characters, well, again, there's a lot of stuff drawn from life there. There's almost a throwaway character as just a point of contact with the sheriff in the story, and the woman's name is Pootie. And that comes exactly from real life, because one of my wife's friends, friend of a friend, I guess I should say, is her nickname is Pootie, and you can guess why. And so I use, and I even Kim even asked her permission, could I use her in that capacity in the novel, and she was like, "Yeah, of course you can."
Wow, that's amazing.
And there, there's other instances of people in that in the book that I've caricatured them to an extent, but they are definitely drawn from life.
I always like to say that artists, whether you be a painter, sculptor, writer, whatever your chosen art is, you're there to hold a mirror up to life. And whether, it's going to be a little distorted because it goes through our own lenses, but really that's what you're doing. You're mirroring back real life as we've seen it, as we've experienced it, even if it is horror.
Yeah. I was talking on an interview. Good Lord, I think that was yesterday. Time flies. About,
but it was nowhere near as cool as this one. I'm just.
Oh, I'm sure. But it was about the characters themselves and how I developed them, how I related to them, and how I hoped they would relate to readers. I didn't want to paint people larger than life in this story. And, there are times that I do. But this one is set in ostensibly a very real world. It's based on this area. The people are based on, like I said, amalgamations of real people. They're painted as real people. So I think that's one of the reasons a lot of readers seem to connect with the characters in this book more than many that I do, simply because I'm showing them under a pretty detailed lens. It's picking up a lot of facets and aspects of who they are as people.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when you go through. So I know you said you took a lot of notes on this. Are you also doing, and this is more of a writing question, the sausage making part of things, are you developing character sheets as well for each individual characters, or do you just write them as they come to you? Which I tend to do myself, but
a little of both. I will usually come up with a stable of characters. Sometimes they don't all survive the weeding out process, but I'll just do a rough sketch of the characters. I'll determine, age, profession, general appearance, temperament, but it's not detailed. Everything that fleshes them out happens, if not while I'm writing, then while I'm brainstorming during the writing, during the process. That's typical. I mean, I've done all kinds of different, I guess, exercises or types of plotting. I've written outlines. I've gone completely by the seat of my pants. I've done combinations of both. I've worked with very, very detailed character outlines, and some just, there's one character. He's good. Going with it, So I've been at this, I guess, long enough to have tried my hand at so many methods. And if I couldn't even pinpoint which is my preferred way,
that was the best way. Next question.
Yeah, I emotionally, I like to just set off writing and see where it goes. But a lot of times that results in an awful lot of pages going to waste.
Yeah.
Or if not to waste, I shouldn't say that, but unusable for the project at hand.
Yeah.
So I like to home in a little bit closer at the beginning anyway.
So like I tend to have my main character, that main protagonist and antagonist, already pretty well thought out before I start writing. But everybody else sort of forms in the fog when I start writing. How much how much time and effort beforehand are you putting into your main characters?
Like I said, before I ever start a novel, I do come up with a cast. You know, like I said, it can change. People can come and go, but I start out actually before anything else. I usually try to come up with the list of characters, and the character sketches that I start with oftentimes don't resemble where they end up. But I do like to have that starting point, and those can be pretty damn detailed. And usually, the more detailed they are, the less whittling I have to do along the way. Whittling and shaping along the way. Although sometimes it's really fun to do it that way.
I can agree with that. I do like to have some characters in mind, but I kind of let them tell me about themselves as I'm working the keyboard. The little voices in my head start to tell me more about themselves.
That is a good point, because so often characters that I thought I had in certain roles and with certain motivations and plotted out what they're going to do, comes a time they just may say, nope. And they go their own way, or tell me that, you've done this wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually I was plugging something that we're both in. Before we got started. This was a fun project to work on for me anyway. For me personally,
it definitely was for me. Yeah,
I got to work with my friends. It was so cool. But so what's next for you?
Well, I have been working with Elizabeth Massey on a collaboration. It's a sort of I'd call it's science fiction horror, leaning a little more toward sci-fi, or I shouldn't even say sci-fi. I'm so sorry. Science fiction. It's kind of like science, but we're about halfway through that, and we've both ended up having to take some breaks from it to work on other things. But and in that interim, I've had a good many readers who've read The House at Blacktooth Pond ask me whether I'm going to revisit that property. And initially I was not, but I've had a couple of people just really pressing me like, well, what happened to the sheriff? What happened to the dog? I'm like, well, I might go back there. And so the more I started thinking about it, I decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start plotting where things might go after the conclusion of that novel. And lo and behold, just like with the story, how those avenues opened up to, it led to the creation of that book. Now the avenues inside that book are starting to point me toward a whole new set of circumstances and new characters. And so I haven't done much with it yet, but I'm seriously fomenting some definite ideas that I might do as a follow up to that book.
Not quite an exclusive on the show, but close to an exclusive. I'm just saying. It's happened before where I've talked people into telling me about books that were just coming out, and they're like, well, I haven't told anybody about that. I'm like, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Well, Mark, it's been a great pleasure. I appreciate you giving me some of your time. I am going to tell everybody, get out and buy a copy of The House at Blacktooth Pond. I'm going to put the QR code with the magic of editing right here.
Okay.
Boom. See, look at that. Now you can go scan it with your phones, go out and buy it. And I'm assuming it's available in hard copy and ebook.
Yes, it's ebook, paperback, and audiobook.
Oh,
and
nice.
The audiobook is read by Joshua Saxon, who is one of my all-time favorite readers, because I'm an avid audiobook listener these days.
I'm listening to a lot myself lately, because I'll like go to the gym and I'll get on the treadmill and put my headphones on.
Yeah, I walk about 5 miles a day, every day, without fail, and that has been the the best time for me to just immerse myself in stories and books. And Joshua Saxon also had narrated Blue Devil Island, and that
Okay.
was my first experience with him. But he's
Nice.
done some big books. He's done F. Paul Wilson. I think his book right before mine was The Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, wow.
He's done a passel of audiobooks to say the least.
Interesting. Wow. That is that is kind of cool. My next novel actually comes out next year, and it'll be, we'll have an audiobook version as well, and it's going to be very, very exciting. I'm kind of excited to go through the process with the publisher rather than myself doing all the arrangements, because I think as an indie, when you have to do that stuff yourself, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah.
I want to write stories and make things happen and let somebody else deal with all the other stuff.
Yeah, well, that's just it. I hate outlining. Every now and then, I will have to do an outline, for a publisher or whatever. But I want somebody else to do that for me because I hate outlining, but they won't.
Yeah, it's funny, you can't get people to crawl into your head and pull your ideas out and put it in the paper.
It's a crime. What can I say?
You would think we could hire a clairvoyant at this point just to do. Yeah. Actually, if they just write the book for us and hand it to us, that would be great.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
No. I'm kidding.
I thought as much.
I'm anti-AI, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. I have made a point. Anything I write now and send out, it always said, or even on, if I'm doing book production, anything, it's no AI was used either in the composing or the production of this material.
Now, I do caveat that by saying, so it's really interesting when you look at when you're using Word, I use Word, and it's making like suggestions. Do it this, you've violated the grammatic rules. Me speak good English, me fail English. That's impossible. When you've violated those rules, that is a form of AI coming to you and saying, "Hey, this isn't right."
I would go with that, but when it's nothing more than, say, a grammar checker or a spell checker, yes. And that's basically what I use, and of course a thesaurus, but that's more of a safeguard than something that is doing your creative work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned a thesaurus. You want something hilarious. There is one book in this room. So I have two books behind me. They're actually squishing down something right now because it got wrinkled and I need it flat. It's for an art project I'm working on. But there's one book in my entire office I never shelve because I'm constantly using it.
Oh, okay.
Yep. It's and I swear by the physical copy. That, and I've got behind me, let's see, right along there, that's actually a bunch of dictionaries. And I have dictionaries from the 1800s all the way up to modern era, because what I find is they actually offer different definitions because time has changed. So I like to be able to look at the different definitions. I'm a dictionary nerd.
Yeah, I used to have, I bet I had about a dozen different dictionaries. I don't have that many anymore because I don't have enough space for what I've got, much less a bunch of dictionaries. But I've probably got 4. And there are times I'll still pull those suckers out.
Oh yes. I always pull out the heart, because when you're looking through a dictionary, I've said this before on this show. When you're going through your definitions, there are definitions that come from the same, or there are words that come from the same root word that are going to be nestled together. And you may not have thought of it, but then you're like, oh, I like that word better. What does that word mean? Or, it's a little bit more fun that way. Okay. Anyway, for all you lovely people, go out and read the book, The House at Blacktooth Pond. I don't suppose you have a copy of it that you could hold up.
I'm trying to, maybe not real close at hand. Hang on. Let me see what's in this stack.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, we like
I do not. But I do have the copy of Shunned Houses, the anthology that has the story, The House at Blacktooth Pond.
Nice.
And that is from, I think, what is it, WordPress Publishing. And it's edited by, S.T. Joshi and Catherine Karasman.
There you go. There you go. So, like I said, I had that up. I will also put at the end of this video the QR code, so you can go out, get a copy, support us writers, because we need to eat. It's
Yeah.
just the way it
And I'm
works.
being reminded right here that cats also need to eat a lot, a whole
Yeah.
lot. So
I
yeah,
have my terrier right
please
down
buy
here.
my book and support my poor starving cat who just went that way.
Yeah. Well, and my poor starving terrier. So,
Yeah.
you can buy it. That's what you can do, ladies and gentlemen. Go out and buy Mark's book. You go out and buy one of my books. If you want to stay with the monster theme, Codename Formula 12, Nazi zombies. Can't go wrong.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
You're
having
welcome.
me on, and it's truly my pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's been my greatest pleasure to have you on. Always an honor. And ladies and gentlemen, next next interview, I'm going to try and get back on Dale Kesterson, fellow Jumpmaster Press writer. She's wonderful. I did an interview with her a while back, and I just want to kind of like update people on what she's got going on. So anyway, on behalf of Mark and myself, this is All Things Writing, saying thank you very much for chiming in, and this is us signing off. This has been another amazing episode of All Things Writing. If you heard something that got your wheels spinning, check out the links in the show notes. Also, please follow the show and remember to leave those reviews. Those simple acts of kindness mean the world to us. Hop on over to briannowak.com, and that is Brian with a Y, and check out my latest novels. I'm on Amazon or wherever you buy your ebooks. And as a reminder, the music you heard on the show today was used under license from the artist Ryan Ancona. Thanks for listening to the show, and have a blessed day.